the hell out of here, you damn beggar!
Get the hell out of here, you damn beggar! The words cracked through the bank lobby like a whip, slicing the hum of printers and the faint hiss of air conditioning. Heads turned. Pens froze mid-signature. The sentence hung in the air, raw and electric, while the man who'd spoken, Charles Denton, branch manager of First Colonial Bank, adjusted his tie as if to smooth the insult back into propriety, but nothing could soften it. It had already landed, and the way the black farmer standing before him didn't move, didn't flinch, only stared, promised that the echo of those words would not die here. The bank gleamed with the false holiness of small-town money. Brass rails polished daily, marble tiles cold enough to bite through the soles, a clock ticking with smug precision above the teller's booths. Outside, sunlight boiled on Main Street, but inside it was the color of paper and dust. The scent ink, coffee, disinfectant clung to everything, even the faces of those pretending not to look. Isaiah Carter stood at the counter, hat crushed in his hands. He was tall, built from years of farm work, yet in that moment he seemed cornered by invisible walls. His clothes clean, but worn carried the smell of rain and soil. Sweat traced the side of his neck as he tried to steady his voice. "Sir," he said quietly, "I only asked for an appointment. I've got papers, figures, references." Denton's laughter broke in, sharp and dismissive. "Figures? You people always got figures. Let me guess. Your cousin promised the crop would triple if the Lord willed it?" He looked past Isaiah toward the line of customers, as if inviting witnesses. "Gentlemen, this man thinks he can just stroll in here and ask for $200,000. $200,000! Tell me, Mr. Carter, you planning to buy yourself a throne out there in the fields?" A ripple of uneasy chuckles spread among the waiting customers. A teenage teller tried to hide her expression behind the glass window. Another clerk, older, smirked openly. The humiliation smelled metallic, like blood before it spills. Isaiah set his hat on the counter, palms flat beside it. "I came here respectful. I paid off every loan your bank ever gave me. My credit's clean." "Clean?" Denton leaned forward, eyes glinting behind his glasses. "You've got 10 acres and a busted tractor. That's not credit. That's charity waiting to happen." A woman near the door whispered to her husband, "He should just leave, James." Her husband nodded, though his eyes never left the scene. "I'm not asking for charity," Isaiah said. "Just investment. I got contracts lined up for the harvest. If I can buy the South Acres—" Denton slammed his palm on the counter, the sound cracking like a gunshot. "Enough! You think I'm blind? You think because you can quote a number or two I'll hand you bank money? This isn't some back alley co-op. This is First Colonial, and I run it by rules, not pity." The bank went silent. Even the clock seemed to hesitate. Denton smoothed his cufflinks, savoring the quiet authority that always followed his outbursts. "Now pick up your hat and get out," he said, voice lower, colder. "Before I have someone escort you?" Isaiah didn't move. His reflection trembled in the polished marble floor, a dark figure surrounded by white columns and glass. His voice, when it came, was soft, but carried through the entire lobby. "You shouldn't speak to people that way." Denton laughed again, short and mean. "People? You walked in here begging? That doesn't make you people. It makes you a problem." A few gasps fluttered through the room. Megan Lowe, the junior teller, froze mid-counting. She glanced toward Isaiah, then at her boss. "Mr. Denton?" "Stay out of it, Megan," he barked. "This man's done wasting my time." Isaiah looked at her briefly, just enough to show gratitude, and then back at Denton. "You'll regret that," he said quietly. "Sooner than you think." Denton snorted, waving him off. "Oh, please." "The only thing I regret is letting you track mud on my floor." The words drew another brittle laugh from the onlookers. Isaiah picked up his hat slowly, dusted it with one thumb, and set it on his head. When he turned toward the exit, the faint light from the doorway caught his eyes. Steady, calm, unreadable. The door hissed as it opened, the sound oddly final. Outside, the heat slammed into him like a wall. The street shimmered. The town seemed to hold its breath. Across the road, a couple of boys leaned on their bikes, whispering. Isaiah could still hear Denton's voice echoing through the glass-mocking hollow. He didn't hurry. He walked to his truck, that old blue Ford with Carter Farms hand-painted on its side, and leaned against it for a moment, letting the anger settle into something sharper. Inside the bank, Denton strutted back toward his office. "You see that?" he said to no one in particular. "You gotta put people like him in their place early, or they start thinking they belong here." He loosened his tie and chuckled. The clerks gave polite, nervous smiles. Megan didn't move. He paused by her desk. "Problem, Miss Lowe?" "No, sir," she said, though her hands trembled. "Good. Make sure you sanitize that counter." He disappeared into his office, humming. Minutes passed. The normal rhythm returned, stamping papers, clinking coins, doors opening and closing. Yet every sound felt off, as if the building itself remembered what had happened. Outside, Isaiah climbed into his truck, rested both hands on the steering wheel, and stared at the bank's glass doors. Through them, he could still see Denton's shadow moving, proud and unbothered. The insult replayed in his mind, every syllable striking harder than the last. "Get the hell out of here, you damn beggar!" He exhaled slowly, reached into the glove compartment, and pulled out a phone. His fingers hovered over a contact labeled Harrison Co. Holdings. He hesitated, then tapped. A smooth voice answered almost immediately. "Mr. Carter, been a long time." "It has," Isaiah said. "You still handle private acquisitions?" There was a pause, then a soft laugh. "We do. And if I remember right, you handle things in cash." "I do." "What's the target?" Isaiah's eyes fixed on the white letters above the door. First Colonial Bank, gleaming against the afternoon light. "A small-town branch," he said, "and I want it today." The voice on the line whistled low. "That's ambitious. Can it be done? For you? With the right number, yes. We'll need immediate verification, though." "I've got it ready. Then we'll move fast. I'll call the central board, handle the transfer paperwork. Where do you want the deed delivered?" Isaiah looked again at the building that had just spit him out. His reflection wavered in the glass, framed by marble and disdain. "Right there," he said, by close of business. He hung up, started the engine, and pulled into traffic. Inside, Denton poured himself another cup of coffee, unaware that his world had already begun to shift. He laughed with a local contractor, boasting about interest rates and undeserving applicants. The sound carried down the hallway like nails against glass. But outside, the storm was forming, not in the sky, but in the quiet resolve of a man who'd had enough. Isaiah's truck vanished around the corner, leaving behind only the faint rumble of its engine and the whispers that would, by sunset, turn into legend. Hours later, the sun had drained to a honeyed tilt, and Fairview smelled of dust and cut grass. The bank's fluorescent lights hummed with indifferent patience. Isaiah walked through the revolving door as if stepping into a chapter he'd already decided to finish. He moved with a calm that made people look twice. In his left hand was a slim black briefcase. Inside, the lobby's small conversations nodded into silence when Denton saw him. Denton straightened. He had expected the man to disappear. He did not expect a return with an offer. Isaiah set the briefcase on the counter without haste. The brass latches clicked. Megan went pale. Tellers stopped fumbling cash. "Back again?" "I thought I told you." Denton reached for the trite theatrics of authority. Isaiah interrupted, voice soft but unyielding. I'm here to buy the branch. Laughter leaked out like bad coffee. It was the same sneer, sharpened by disbelief. Buy the branch? Denton repeated as if tasting the irony. With what, Mr. Carter? Your plowshares? Isaiah opened the briefcase. Inside were stacks of bills and bank-certified checks. He produced an envelope from Harrison Co. Holdings and placed it on the counter. The room inhaled. Murmurs rose. Megan stepped forward, hands trembling. Are those cash? Isaiah nodded. 200,000. Cash. The purchase is arranged through Harrison Co. Funds are verified to an escrow account pending transfer. The board's representative is on standby to authenticate. He watched Denton closely, noting how authority twitched like a puppet on frayed strings. Denton's laughter curdled. You can't just waltz in and hand over paper and expect me to sign away a branch. There are protocols, approvals. His voice, meant to wound, sounded thin. I understand enough, Isaiah said. I want to settle today. No loans, no partnerships. I buy it outright. He tapped the papers. Everything's been prepared. For a man who dressed in rules like armor, rules were proving thin against the sight of green bills and legal stamps. Denton reached for his phone under the desk. He could call the regional office, alert compliance, stall. He did. The receptionist patched a line. Denton's fingers fumbled with the speaker. Charles Denton, he said, breath clipped. There's an offer, yes. I'll hold. The line connected to a cool, measured voice. The regional manager asked for identifiers. We're verifying, he said. Please, stand by. Stand by. The word felt like a gavel in the hollowed room. The jokes that had been tossed at Isaiah earlier now recoiled. Denton pressed his palm flat to his desk as if to steady himself against the world shifting. People watched. Neighbors, a retired teacher, a man cashing a paycheck. Conversations curdled into fascination. Outside, Main Street's rhythm continued. A child's shout, a delivery truck's beeping. But inside the bank, time folded toward a single pivot. Let them verify, Isaiah said quietly. Let the corporate people see the papers. If everything checks out, process the sale. I'm not here for spectacle. I'm here to close. Megan stepped closer, eyes wet with something that might have been fear, maybe hope. She picked up one of the checks with shaking fingers and read the numbers aloud. Her voice steadied when she read the wire confirmation code. The operations clerk, a man in his 60s who rarely raised his voice, leaned in and adjusted his glasses. He made calls, scrolled through an internal registry, verified stamps and signatures. Slowly, like ice cracking under sun, the evidence held. Denton's posture softened into something like calculation. He realized the leverage he'd once wielded, mockery and gatekeeping, had been met by something tougher than persistence. Legality and cash. For a minute he entertained fury, then considered the consequences of halting a verified transaction in plain sight. Headquarters would have questions. Shareholders would have questions. His petty triumph earlier could become the very lever that toppled his comfortable certainty. You've done the work to satisfy compliance? He asked at last, voice thinner than before. I have, Isaiah said. Harrison Co. handled the escrow. Legal drew the purchase agreements. The funds have been confirmed. My signature is on the sale. I need your cooperation to sign the branch transfer documents. Denton looked at the stacks, at the corporate envelope, then at the tiny faces around him. He saw laughter from hours before turn to curious, then to respect edged with awkwardness. He felt his role become negotiable, not inviolable. With a forced swallow, he reached for the forms. Phones buzzed as regional office staff authenticated codes. Megan filled in a form under Denton's direction. The clerk stamped papers with a steady hand. The manager performed his ritual's initials, boxes checked like a man watching himself be dismantled with civility. There was no crowing, no public apology. Denton's pride folded inward, rusty and silent. When the final lines were signed, Isaiah closed the briefcase but left it unlatched. He met Denton's gaze. He could no longer summon mockery. Instead, he gave a brittle nod. Outside, the sun slid lower and cast longer shadows across the lobby. The town would later tell this as a story of reversal. For now, the bank hummed with a new axis. A man who had been told to get the hell out of here had come back carrying the means to rewrite the rules. Isaiah pocketed the signed papers and moved toward the door. People watched him go not with pity, now, but with an attention that tasted like grudging acknowledgement. Denton sat down as the weight of public scrutiny settled onto him like a coat too heavy for the season. He did not look back. The day had exacted its justice, and he carried it like seed, quiet, ready to grow. No one applauded. No banners were raised. Only a new, reluctant respect settled in the bank like dust finding a new place. Fairview would not forget this afternoon's lesson. By the time Isaiah's truck cleared the edge of Fairview, the sunset had bled into rust. The fields stretched out like a memory that refused to fade, rows of cotton catching the light like pale ghosts. Inside the cab, the radio murmured blues, low and cracked, a sound that seemed to rise from the soil itself. People in town knew him only as that farmer from outside Mill Creek, the one who sold melons on weekends and brought eggs to the diner. They didn't know the man who sat behind the wheel now, hands steady on the leather that had molded to his grip. They didn't know that Isaiah Carter had once walked marble floors higher than any in Fairview. Years earlier, before the crops and before the debt that swallowed his father, Isaiah had lived in Atlanta. He'd worn suits tailored to fit shoulders built by labor but disciplined by boardrooms. He'd worked for Harris & Co. Holdings as a field assessor and analyst who measured the value of failing businesses for acquisition. He'd been good, frighteningly good, until the crash of 2008 wiped the ladder from under him. His father's health failed that same year. Isaiah went home to Mississippi, to land too dry and banks too cold. He'd stayed because legacy mattered more than comfort. The Carter farm was 30 acres of stubborn history, the only thing the family still owned after generations of sharecropping and broken promises. His father had died believing that the land, if tended right, could feed not just their bodies, but their pride. Isaiah parked beside the old barn. The wind shifted, bringing the smell of damp hay and diesel. He stepped out, boots crunching gravel, and looked at the farmhouse light glowing faintly through a window. Inside, his sister Ruth waited. Ruth met him at the door, wiping her hands on a towel. "You look like trouble," she said. Her smile didn't hide the worry. "You went to the bank, didn't you?" "I did." "And?" He set the briefcase on the table. He laughed in my face. She exhaled, long and tired. "You expected anything different from Denton? That man's been spitting on folks since he learned to talk." Isaiah poured 2 cups of coffee, black and hot. This was worse. "He called me a beggar. In front of everyone." Ruth's eyes darkened. "What did you do?" "Left," he said. Then, after a pause, "For a while?" She studied him. "And now you're back with that look again. The one you had when the county tried to steal our water rights. I made some calls." He sat down, unbuttoned his shirt collar. "Do you remember Mr. Harrison?" Her brow lifted. "Your old boss? The one who bought half the banks in Georgia during the crash?" "That's the one." She set her cup down slowly. "Isaiah." "What are you doing?" "Finishing something," he said. "That man thinks I'm dirt under his shoe. He doesn't know I once drew the maps he walks on. I know how his world works: numbers, leverage, fear. Harrison taught me well." Ruth crossed her arms. Revenge doesn't plow fields. This isn't revenge, Isaiah said. It's correction. Outside, cicadas screamed into the dusk. He took a long sip of coffee, then looked through the window toward the faint lights of town. All those years I spent valuing other men's land. Ruth. All those ledgers. All those zeros. Back then I thought I'd lost myself when I came home. But I was learning what value really means. She sat across from him, silent for a while. And you really can buy it? The bank? I already did, he said softly. Harrison's firm handles the acquisitions quietly. They've been buying rural branches for months. I wired the down payment 2 hours ago. Her mouth opened, then closed. You bought the place that turned you down? Isaiah nodded. Before closing time, they'll receive confirmation. Denton will have to process the paperwork himself. Ruth laughed, half in disbelief, half in pride. Lord have mercy, Isaiah. She reached across the table, squeezed his hand. Daddy would have loved to see this. He looked at her fingers, calloused like his own. No. Daddy would have told me to forgive, but he'd also tell me to make sure no man ever calls a Carter a beggar again. They sat there for a while, the kitchen humming with the sound of the fridge and night insects. On the wall hung a faded photograph, their father leaning against a plow, sunlight pouring over his shoulders. Isaiah's phone buzzed. He answered. Yes? The same smooth voice from earlier filled the room. Everything cleared, Mr. Carter. Document signed electronically, escrow confirmed. Congratulations. The Fairview branch of First Colonial is now under Carter Holdings, LLC. Thank you, Isaiah said. One more thing, the man added. The regional office requested that you meet the branch manager for a transitional statement. It seems poetic, doesn't it? Isaiah allowed himself a small smile. It does. When he hung up, Ruth was watching. You going back there? I am. She rose, walked to the counter, and took down their father's old leather ledger. She flipped it open to a blank page, wrote something in her neat cursive, tore the sheet free, and handed it to him. What's this? A line Daddy used to say when they cheated him on cotton weight. She smiled faintly. Read it when you're done. Isaiah folded the paper and slid it into his shirt pocket. Then he took his hat from the peg and stepped outside. The air was thick with the smell of rain-soaked soil. His truck engine roared to life. As he drove back toward town, the road shimmered beneath the headlights, puddles reflecting pieces of a sky turning violet. His thoughts were steady now. No anger. Only resolve. He replayed Denton's voice, the way the word beggar had snapped across the room, how the laughter had filled the cracks afterward. That sound would end tonight. When the lights of Main Street reappeared, glowing like coins in a trough, Isaiah slowed. People were leaving shops, heading home for supper. The bank still burned bright at the corner open late for quarterly audits. He parked across the street and sat for a long moment, watching the glass doors swing as customers trickled out. His reflection on the windshield looked almost unfamiliar. A man who had once been measured in acres now measured himself in purpose. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the note Ruth had given him. The handwriting was careful, old-fashioned. A man's worth ain't what they lend him. It's what he can stand to lose and still stand. Isaiah smiled, folded the paper back, and stepped out into the cooling air. The night was ready. By the time Isaiah crossed the street, the bank glowed like a lantern in the twilight. Its glass doors reflected the amber streetlights and the dull shimmer of rain still clinging to the pavement. Inside, the familiar drone of fluorescent bulbs hummed against the sharp clicks of calculators and keyboards. The staff was finishing end-of-day reports. It looked ordinary, the same cold sanctuary that had spat him out only hours ago. Isaiah pushed open the door. The bell chimed. Conversations thinned. He walked in with his hat low, the same farmer they had laughed at before, only now his steps carried a weight that no one could name yet. Behind the counter, Megan looked up. Her breath caught when she recognized him. "Mr. Carter," she whispered. The tremor in her voice drew the attention of others. Heads turned. Murmurs started. Charles Denton emerged from his glass-walled office, jacket off, sleeves rolled, the master of his domain basking in the afterglow of his own authority. He froze for a heartbeat when he saw Isaiah, then forced a smirk. "Well, well," Denton drawled, straightening his tie. "Didn't I throw you out already? You forget something? Maybe your pride?" Isaiah's gaze met his, calm, deliberate. "No. I came to collect something." Denton laughed, clapping his hands once, sharp as a slap. "Oh, this is rich. Someone get security." But before he could finish, Megan stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. "Sir, maybe you should hear him out." "Excuse me?" Denton barked. "You think this is a show?" "The man's trespassing." Isaiah's voice sliced through the air, even, measured. "You'll want to hear me, Mr. Denton, because I own this bank now." The words hit the room like thunder muffled by marble. Every sound died. Even the hum of the lights seemed to stutter. Denton blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly, then, as always, tried to laugh it away. "Own this bank? You?" His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "That's cute. You got a check from your church bake sale, maybe?" Isaiah set a folder on the counter, pushing it toward Megan. "Verification documents from Harrison Co. Holdings. Sale completed 2 hours ago. You can call Regional if you'd like. They'll confirm." The color drained from Megan's face. She took the papers in trembling hands, scanning the legal seals, the wire confirmation, the corporate signatures. Her eyes darted to Denton's. "Sir, this looks real." Denton snatched the papers from her, flipping through them with a fury that betrayed the tremor in his hands. "Forgery," he hissed. "You think you can waltz in here with fake documents?" "I'd advise against that," Isaiah interrupted softly. "Accusing your new employer of fraud tends to end badly." The line struck like a quiet gunshot. People gasped. One of the tellers covered her mouth. Denton slammed the folder shut. "You think I'm scared of some trick paperwork? You don't know how this world works, Carter. You don't buy respect. You're nothing but dirt in boots. You think some rich firm gives a damn about you?" Isaiah didn't respond. He simply stood there, his stillness making Denton's shouting seem smaller, weaker. Then the phone on the manager's desk rang. Loud, jarring. Everyone froze. Megan answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "First Colonial Fairview branch." "Yes, sir." "Yes, he's here." Her hand shook as she held out the receiver to Denton. "It's the regional director." Denton's throat worked as he took the call. "Yes?" "This is Denton." He listened, color draining from his cheeks. "Yes, I understand." "Harrison Co." "Yes, wait, what? The sale effective immediately?" His eyes darted toward Isaiah, widening with disbelief. "No, there must be a mistake." "Of course, sir, but—" "Yes, I understand." When he hung up, the phone landed on the counter with a dull thud. He stared at Isaiah as if seeing him for the first time. "You," he rasped. "You, actually—" "I told you you'd regret it," Isaiah said. The murmurs in the lobby grew louder. The same people who'd laughed that morning now whispered like wind through cornfields. Denton took a step back. His voice cracked between anger and desperation. You don't belong behind this counter. You don't belong in this building. You can't. Isaiah stepped forward, closing the distance until Denton had to tilt his chin upward. Belonging, Isaiah said quietly, isn't something you give. It's something we take when we've earned it. And I earned it a long time ago. The manager's face flushed red. You think you can humiliate me? You walk in here with your show, your performance. This isn't a performance, Isaiah said. It's the cost of your arrogance. He turned to Megan. Would you mind calling the staff together, Miss Lowe? I'd like to make an announcement. Megan nodded numbly and began moving through the bank, her heels clicking like punctuation marks on the marble floor. Within minutes, everyone stood clustered near the counter tellers, clerks, even the janitor, who had come in for the night shift. Denton stood off to the side, fuming silently. Isaiah took off his hat, holding it against his chest. You all know me, he began, his voice steady, rich with quiet conviction. You saw what happened this morning. You heard what was said. I didn't come back to shame anyone. I came back because this place, this system forgot what fairness means. You can't measure a man's worth by the dirt on his boots or the color of his skin. The silence deepened. Even Denton's breath sounded harsh against it. When I asked for a loan, I asked as a farmer, as a man who's built something with his hands. I was told I wasn't worth the paper. I signed on. But every one of you here knows the truth. Worth isn't granted. It's proved over and over until there's no one left to deny it. He let the words sink in, his eyes sweeping the room. This bank belongs to everyone who's been told they can't. And as of tonight, that starts changing. Megan's eyes glistened. One of the older tellers crossed herself. Denton broke the stillness with a bitter laugh. You think you can just walk in here and make speeches? You'll fail, Carter. You'll drown in paperwork, in lawsuits, in rules you don't understand. Isaiah turned toward him slowly. You're right, he said. I don't understand how a man could look at another human being and see less. But I understand numbers. I understand property. And I understand that your employment contract ends at closing time. The words hung there. Megan blinked. Sir, you mean... Isaiah nodded. Mr. Denton is relieved of duty, effective immediately. Security will escort him out after he collects his things. The color in Denton's face collapsed into pallor. You can't... I can, Isaiah said softly. Because you told me I couldn't. The room was silent, but for the slow ticking of the lobby clock. Each second sounded like a verdict. Denton looked around at faces he'd once commanded, now turned away. For the first time in years, he looked small. Isaiah turned back to the staff. Tomorrow, the sign outside changes, but the doors stay open. Fairview needs a bank that believes in its people. He took his hat, nodded once, and walked out into the night air, leaving behind the hum of fluorescent lights and the stunned silence of a man undone by his own pride. The night didn't end with silence. Charles Denton didn't leave. Not really. He was escorted out. Yes, but only as far as the marble steps where the street lamps painted long shadows across the rain-darkened pavement. He stood there for several seconds, breathing hard. His tie loosened, his pride splintered into something sharp and dangerous. Through the glass doors, he could still see Isaiah inside, shaking hands with a clerk, that damn hat under his arm like a crown. You think this is over? He muttered to the reflection, staring back at him. The reflection didn't answer. It just stared. Pale-faced and small, a man stripped of the only power he'd ever had. He turned away and stormed down Main Street, the echo of his shoes slapping through puddles. The bank manager everyone feared had become a drunk man's story, a figure fading fast. But inside him, the humiliation festered. Across the street, a few men sat outside the corner tap. Fairview's only bar, open past 9. They'd seen the whole thing, Denton thrown out by the very man he'd ridiculed that morning. They grinned when he approached. "Well, if it isn't the king without a castle," one of them said. Denton shot him a look so venomous it silenced them. "Shut your damn mouth." He pushed into the bar, the door smacking against the frame. The stale smell of beer and smoke met him like a taunt. He ordered whiskey no ice. 1 shot turned into 3. The laughter around him became noise without faces, but every clink of glass, every whisper of, "Did you hear what Carter did?" fed the fire in his gut. He slammed his glass down. "You all think this is funny? You think he owns me?" The bartender, wiping down the counter, didn't look up. "Charles, maybe call it a night." "Not till I finish what he started," Denton spat. Meanwhile, inside the bank, Isaiah sat alone in the manager's office, his office now. The smell of leather and disinfectant lingered like memory. He ran a hand across the mahogany desk, tracing the grain where the day's cruelty had begun. The echo of Denton's voice still lingered in the walls. He looked at the framed photo still sitting on the shelf. Denton shaking hands with a regional director, smiling like a man, certain the world bent in his direction. Isaiah picked it up, studied it, then set it face down. Outside, rain began to fall again, a soft patter against the glass. Megan appeared in the doorway, hesitant. "Sir, do you need anything before we close?" Isaiah smiled faintly. "Just call me Isaiah, and no go home. You've done enough for today." She nodded, though her eyes searched his face. "You handled him better than I could have imagined." He leaned back in the chair that had belonged to Denton hours ago. "No," he said softly. "I just handled what's been waiting too long." By the time she left, the bank was empty, except for Isaiah and the hum of fluorescent lights that refused to sleep. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the day settle. He didn't know that across town, Denton was already plotting his return. "Open up, Jerry." Denton banged on the side door of the maintenance office. Rain plastering his hair to his forehead. Jerry, the night custodian, cracked the door, eyes widening when he saw him. "Mr. Denton? You're not supposed to be here. I need to get something I left. It's important." Denton forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just a quick look in the office." Jerry hesitated. He'd worked under Denton for 10 years, long enough to know when the man was lying. But old habits die hard. He stepped aside. Denton walked in, dripping water onto the floor tiles. The bank was dark except for the low blue glow of security lights. Everything was silent except the rain ticking against the windows. He moved like a ghost through the hall, his hand brushing the wall as he went. He reached the manager's office door. His nameplate was already gone. In its place, a blank rectangle waited for new letters. That small, empty space felt like a knife. Inside, Isaiah was still there, reviewing the documents left from the transition. He looked up when the door swung open. "Charles," he said calmly, "you should be home." Denton stepped forward, his voice thick. "You think you can take everything from me in a day?" Isaiah didn't rise. "You took it from yourself long before I got here. Don't you preach to me?" Denton shouted. "You think money makes you better than me? You think just because you flashed some papers you own this place?" He slammed a fist on the desk. "I built this branch." Isaiah's expression didn't change. "You built walls. I just bought the doors." For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain intensified outside, tapping like a clock running out of time. Denton's breath came in ragged bursts. He wanted to shout, to hurt, to reclaim the control slipping through his fingers. But every inch of Isaiah's calm magnified his own collapse. "You don't deserve this," Denton whispered, voice trembling. "None of you do." "Maybe not," Isaiah said, "but we earned it." Denton's hand twitched toward the desk drawer, the one he'd always kept locked. Isaiah saw the movement, slow but deliberate. His eyes narrowed. "Charles," he warned, "don't." The drawer opened with a metallic click. Inside, a revolver lay in its worn leather holster, an old relic Denton kept for security. His fingers brushed the handle. Isaiah rose then, steady but firm. "That's not the way out of this." Denton looked at him, the whites of his eyes flashing under the fluorescent light. "The way out? The way out was mine until you forgot what decency looks like," Isaiah said. "Put it down." For a heartbeat, Denton's hand tightened around the grip. His knuckles whitened. The rain outside grew louder, wind rattling the glass. Then, as if the fight drained from him all at once, he let go. The revolver clattered back into the drawer. He stumbled back into the chair opposite Isaiah's, covering his face with both hands. The room smelled of sweat and metal. Isaiah walked around the desk and stopped in front of him. "You spent your whole life guarding power that wasn't yours," he said quietly. "Now you can start learning what humility feels like." Denton didn't answer. His shoulders shook, but no sound came out. Isaiah reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the slip of paper Ruth had written. He placed it gently on the desk between them. "You can read that when you're ready." Then he turned, leaving the office and the man inside, alone with the sound of rain and the echo of everything he'd lost. As Isaiah stepped outside, the storm finally broke. Thunder rolled across Fairview like applause for something long overdue. The storm eased to a whisper by dawn. Fairview woke to damp streets, puddles reflecting the bruised purple of retreating clouds. Inside the bank, the fluorescent lights hummed again. But something was different, quieter, steadier. The air no longer smelled of fear. It smelled of something unnameable, like possibility. Isaiah stood by the window in his new office, watching the first customers of the day cross Main Street. The brass letters on the glass door still read, First Colonial Bank. But by tomorrow they'd bear a new name, Carter Financial Trust, a legacy reclaimed. Megan entered with a clipboard. Her posture was straight now, shoulders unbowed. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said, then corrected herself. "Isaiah." "Morning," he said, with a small smile. "How's everyone?" A little dazed. But good dazed. She hesitated. "They can't stop talking about last night." He turned toward her, hands in his pockets. "That's not what I want them to remember. The story isn't about what he lost. It's about what we'll build." Megan nodded, eyes flickering with admiration. "Still, people keep asking how you pulled it off. One day you're denied a loan, and a few hours later, you're signing payroll." Isaiah's smile deepened, but there was something guarded behind it. It wasn't one day, Megan. It was 20 years. He moved back to the desk, setting down a folder marked Confidential. "You ever heard of the Delta Consolidation Act?" She frowned. "Can't say I have." "It's a little-known clause from the early 2000s, Isaiah said. When banks merge, certain underperforming branches are classified as transferable rural assets. They can be sold quietly, without a press release, without shareholder announcements, to qualified private buyers. Harris & Co. specializes in those acquisitions." Megan blinked. "You mean this branch was already on the list?" Isaiah nodded. "For months." Denton just didn't know it. He thought he was untouchable, but the numbers told a different story. Declining profits, bad loans, high turnover. He flipped the folder open, showing rows of data. The corporation was planning to cut him loose by the end of the quarter. Megan sank into a chair. So you didn't just buy the bank? You rescued it. Isaiah shrugged lightly. Let's call it redemption for Tatin. For the town, not for me. He looked out the window again, watching the school bus rumble past, the same kids waving to their parents outside the diner. Fairview's been living on borrowed breath. The farmers, the shopkeepers, they've been feeding this bank their sweat for decades, and all it's given back is debt. That ends now. Megan studied him for a moment. You sound like a man with a plan. I have one, he said simply. But plans are only as strong as the people who believe in them. I'll need you. All of you. Before she could reply, a knock came at the door. The tall figure of Tom Weaver, the regional compliance officer from Harrison Co., stepped inside. His gray suit gleamed with the precision of someone who knew exactly how much his time was worth. Mr. Carter, Weaver said, offering his hand. Congratulations on the acquisition. Quite a statement you made last night. Isaiah shook it firmly. Appreciate you coming down so fast. Weaver smirked. Wouldn't miss it for the world. We don't often see buyouts executed in under 8 hours. Headquarters is intrigued. I had motivation. I bet you did. Weaver opened his briefcase, pulling out a sheaf of papers. Now, about the fine print. The purchase includes assets, but also liabilities. The regional board's curious how you plan to handle delinquent accounts. Isaiah's expression hardened slightly. We'll restructure them. No more 30% penalties, no predatory rates. I want this bank to lend fairly. Real investments, not traps. Weaver chuckled under his breath. Noble, but not exactly profitable. Isaiah leaned forward. Maybe not in the short term. But stability breeds loyalty. Loyalty keeps doors open. That's profit enough. Weaver regarded him for a long moment. You talk like a man who doesn't need money. Isaiah smiled faintly. Maybe because I learned what it can't buy. A pause stretched between them. The air conditioning hummed louder. Finally, Weaver closed his case. Very well. Headquarters will honor your structure, sirree, for now. Just remember, idealism doesn't balance ledgers. When he left, Megan exhaled. He doesn't get it. He doesn't have to, Isaiah said quietly. He just needs to stay out of the way. She hesitated again, glancing toward the hallway. What about Denton? Isaiah's jaw tightened. He'll get his severance. I don't intend to ruin him, just to make sure he remembers. But even as he said it, his gut told him the man wasn't finished. Pride, like Denton's, didn't die easy. It retreated, sharpened, waited for dark corners. That night, as Isaiah locked up, the town was quiet. The street lamps buzzed faintly, the air still thick from the storm. Across the street, the reflection in the diner window showed him his own outline. Weary? Yes, but standing straighter than he had in years. Then movement flickered in the corner of his eye. A shape by the alley. He turned. Nothing but the sway of a loose sign. Still, the feeling lingered. He slid the key into his truck door and paused when he saw it. A scrap of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. The handwriting was messy, jagged, written in black marker. You don't belong here. He folded it, jaw tightening, and tucked it into his pocket. The night wind tugged at his coat. He didn't need to guess who had left it. Back home, he spread more documents across his table. Community investment plans, loan forgiveness drafts, partnership proposals. Fairview needed more than revenge. It needed roots. On one paper, he'd written a single sentence. Power only means something when you share it. He stared at the words for a long time. The phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. You think you've won. Wait until tomorrow. No signature. Isaiah's thumb hovered over the screen before setting it face down. He'd fought storms worse than this, real ones that tore roofs from barns and lives from hope. But something about the words felt colder than rain. He turned off the lamp, the farmhouse falling into silence. Through the window, the distant lights of the bank glimmered faintly in the darkness, like an unblinking eye watching both men, the one who'd lost everything and the one who'd finally taken it back. By morning, the quiet of Fairview felt heavy, like the calm before thunder. The sun rose slow and pale, dragging its light across the wet streets. A thin fog hung over the town, swallowing sound, muting everything to whispers. But beneath that hush, something trembled. Anticipation, rumor, fear. The Fairview Chronicle hit porches at dawn. Its front page carried a headline that no one expected. Local farmer acquires first colonial bank. Community in shock. A grainy photo of Isaiah, mid-handshake with Megan, filled the page. Beneath it, the caption read, Isaiah Carter, owner of Carter Farms, completes a surprise buyout of the Fairview branch in partnership with Harris & Co. Holdings. The story spread faster than gossip ever had. By the time Isaiah parked his truck in front of the bank, people were already gathering, curious townsfolk, businessmen, even a few reporters who smelled a headline worth chasing. Inside, Megan stood by the front counter answering phone calls in rapid succession. Yes, ma'am. Yes, it's true. No. We're not closing, ma'am. Mr. Carter will address everyone shortly. Isaiah stepped in, his presence instantly centering the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye followed him. Morning, folks, he said simply, setting his hat on the counter. Give me 5 minutes to get settled, and I'll answer what I can. The crowd nodded, murmuring among themselves. Some smiled, genuinely proud. Others stared wary, men who'd once benefited from Denton's selective generosity. Megan leaned close as he passed. You sure about this? Talking to everyone at once? He nodded. Better they hear it from me than from a headline. He moved toward the office, his office, but stopped cold. The door was ajar. Papers scattered across the floor. The lamp on its side, the window cracked. Isaiah's voice dropped. Lock the front doors. Megan obeyed instantly. The chatter in the lobby dimmed as the staff moved in quiet, alert. Isaiah stepped into the office, his boots crunching over broken glass. On the wall, someone had scrawled a message in red marker, jagged and uneven. A beggar can't run a bank. Isaiah stood still for a long moment, breathing through his nose, forcing calm into his bones. Then he turned to Megan, who hovered behind him, pale. Call the sheriff, he said quietly. Within minutes, Sheriff Boyd, a broad man with a thinning mustache and the disposition of someone perpetually unimpressed, arrived. He took one look at the scene and sighed. You and Denton never did play nice, did you? Think it's him? Isaiah asked. Boyd scratched his chin. Man's humiliated, jobless, half the town laughing at him. That kind of pride turns sour quick. Wouldn't surprise me if he's already deep in a bottle. Isaiah's jaw tightened. If he's desperate, that makes him dangerous. The sheriff nodded. We'll find him. You just keep things calm here. Easier said than done. Outside, reporters were already circling, snapping photos through the windows. The words, "Black man buys local bank," had the kind of charge that didn't need fuel. It burned on its own. Inside, Isaiah stood before the staff. We keep working, he said. The vandalism will be handled. No one's quitting. No one's hiding. We've got customers depending on us, and that's what we focus on. He said it firmly, but underneath A pulse of unease thudded in his chest. He'd expected resistance, whispers, resentment, but this message scrawled in rage, felt personal, a declaration of war. By noon, the sheriff's cruiser pulled up again. Boyd stepped inside, eyes grim. "We found Denton," he said, "or what's left of him." Isaiah stiffened. "What do you mean?" "His car's at the old bridge by Mill Creek. Engine running, door open. He's gone. Gone." The words sank like a stone. "Could have been drunk. Could have slipped. Could have jumped," Boyd said softly. "We'll drag the creek." Isaiah looked away, the memory of Denton's trembling hands flashing back, the revolver, the drawer, the anger that had teetered on the edge of despair. "I didn't want this," Isaiah murmured. "I know," Boyd said, "but the truth don't care what we want." He left Isaiah standing by the desk, staring at the cracked window and the words scrawled across the wall. For a long time, the new owner of Carter Financial Trust didn't move. By late afternoon, the crowd outside had doubled. Rumors flew. Denton ran off with company funds, Carter forced him out, something dark happened last night. The story was mutating, and truth was just another currency. Inside, Megan handed Isaiah a folder. "Regional board sent this. They're requesting an emergency audit." "Already?" She nodded. Word spreading that the acquisition might have been unconventional. Isaiah opened the folder, scanning the notice. "They're looking for a scandal," he said quietly. "Something to undo what they don't want to believe." Megan hesitated. "Can they?" He exhaled slowly. "They can try. But Harrison's signatures are solid." He looked toward the front doors, where the faces pressed against the glass weren't customers anymore. They were spectators. Some looked curious, others hungry for failure. Isaiah straightened his shoulders. "We'll hold a press conference. I'll tell them everything." Megan blinked. "Everything?" He nodded. "Every step. Every number. No secrets." When the cameras came an hour later, Isaiah stood behind the front counter, the same place where Denton had humiliated him only yesterday. The reporters' flashes popped like miniature lightning. "Mr. Carter!" one called out. "Did you use outside influence to force the sale?" "No," Isaiah said firmly. "I used knowledge. I worked for Harris & Co. years ago. I knew how their acquisitions operated. This branch was failing. I simply saw what others ignored." Another voice rose. "What about the vandalism this morning? Do you suspect foul play?" Isaiah paused, eyes steady on the camera lens. "I suspect pain," he said quietly. "And pain makes people do foolish things." There was silence for a heartbeat. Then he added, "This bank isn't built on revenge. It's built on renewal. Fairview deserves a place that listens, not laughs." Applause rose from somewhere in the back. Tentative, then growing. When the conference ended, Isaiah stepped outside, blinking against the late afternoon sun. Across the street, the bridge where the sheriff had gone lay hidden behind trees. The town buzzed, restless. He could feel the fault lines shifting beneath everything: power, perception, the fragile bones of justice. He knew this wasn't over. Denton's story, whatever its end, would haunt Fairview. Maybe it already was. As he walked toward his truck, Megan caught up to him, handing him an envelope. "This came for you by courier," she said. "No return address." Isaiah tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. Denton standing in front of the bank, the night sky behind him. On the back, in shaky handwriting, 4 words. "You forgot the river." Isaiah frowned, turning the photo over again, the unease curling low in his chest. The signature at the bottom was faint, almost erased, but it was there. Charles Denton. He looked toward the horizon where Mill Creek wound through the fields like a dark scar and whispered, "Lord help us all." The river gave him back 2 days later. At dawn, mist rose off Mill Creek like breath from a sleeping beast. Sheriff Boyd stood knee-deep in mud, coat collar turned against the chill. 2 deputies worked silently by the water's edge, their boots sinking into the bank. The sun hadn't yet touched Fairview when they found the body. Charles Denton's pale hand jutted from the reeds, fingers curled as though still gripping something invisible. Pride, maybe, or the last scrap of power he'd once held. Word traveled fast. By noon, half the town lined the bridge, whispering as the sheriff's truck rumbled past with its tarp-covered burden. At the bank, Isaiah heard the news from Megan. Her voice wavered between relief and sorrow. "They found him down by the bend," she said. "He'd been drinking. Sheriff says it looks like he slipped." Isaiah closed his eyes. "No one deserves to die alone." "No," she agreed quietly. "But sometimes we choose the path that leads there." The silence between them was heavy, but not cruel. He walked to the window and watched as the reporters returned, cameras flashing again, vultures circling the story one last time. Fairview hadn't seen this much noise since the flood of '93. "Will they blame you?" Megan asked. Isaiah gave a small, bitter smile. "Some already do." That afternoon, Sheriff Boyd arrived, hat in hand. "You might want to sit, Isaiah." "I'm fine standing." Boyd nodded, his eyes tired. "We found a letter in his car. Addressed to you?" He handed over a sealed envelope, the paper warped from moisture. The handwriting was unmistakable, jagged, uneven, desperate. Isaiah unfolded it slowly. "You were right, I built walls. Thought they'd keep men like you out. Didn't see they'd keep me in. You won, Carter. But it's not the loss that kills me. It's seeing the world move on without my permission. Do something good with it. Make this place fair, if you can. That'll sting worse than anything. Charles." Isaiah folded the letter carefully and set it on his desk. "He wasn't evil," he said finally. "Just trapped in the skin of the world he thought was safe." Boyd sighed. "Maybe so. The paper'll say accident, but the rest's between you and God." He left, the door clicking shut behind him. Isaiah stood there a long time, staring at the small slip of paper that had carried so much venom, now turned confession. Outside, the river kept moving, quiet, indifferent, eternal. The following week passed in a blur of grief and reconstruction. The bank's new sign went up, Financial Trust, in bold, clean letters that gleamed under morning light. The marble floors were scrubbed, the vandalism painted over, the broken window replaced. But the town still buzzed. Some whispered that Isaiah had cursed Denton. Others called it divine justice. And some, mostly those who'd been denied loans before, began walking through the doors for the first time in years, hopeful, nervous, clutching worn hats and folded papers. Isaiah greeted each of them himself. "No promises," he'd say, "but we'll look at the numbers together." On Friday evening, he hosted a small gathering in the lobby, not a celebration, but a beginning. The townsfolk filled the space that once felt cold. Coffee brewed in a big percolator, children ran between chairs, and laughter, real laughter, finally replaced whispers. Ruth arrived last, her dress simple, her eyes bright. "You've done it," she said, hugging him. "You really changed it." Isaiah shook his head. "Just started. Change doesn't come with ink and keys. It comes with time." She studied him. "Still carrying his ghost?" "Not his," Isaiah said. "Ours." They stood together as Megan tapped a glass, quieting the room. "Mr. Carter," she paused, smiling. "Isaiah wants to say a few words." He stepped forward, the room's murmur fading. His reflection shimmered faintly in the polished marble, standing where another man had once shouted him down. "Fairview's always been a town of hard workers," he began. "People who give more than they take, who keep their word when the world forgets what one's worth. This bank will serve those people, the ones who've been turned away, laughed at, or told no when they had everything but a chance." He paused, letting the silence settle. "Yesterday this place belonged to pride. Today it belongs to fairness." Applause filled the lobby, soft but sincere. Ruth's eyes glistened. "Daddy would have liked that," she whispered. After the crowd thinned, Isaiah walked outside, alone. The night was clear, stars pricking the dark like scattered seeds. Across the street, Mill Creek shimmered under moonlight, calm and endless. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Denton's letter. For a moment, he just held it, the paper warm from his touch. Then, with a deep breath, he tore it in half and let the pieces fall into the breeze. They fluttered down the street, lost among the shadows. Megan appeared behind him, hands tucked into her coat. "You sure you want to let that go?" He smiled faintly. Forgiveness isn't keeping reminders. It's letting the river take them. They stood together, watching the fragments vanish into the dark. Months passed. The bank flourished. Small loans went out to farmers rebuilding fences, to families opening bakeries, to students needing tuition. The once cold marble floor grew warm with footsteps. People no longer lowered their voices when Isaiah entered a room. They met his eyes. Fairview changed with him. The diner expanded, new shops opened, and the town began to believe again that money could serve rather than suffocate. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the office was empty, Isaiah would walk to the window and watch the reflection of his own bank across the street. He'd see himself, older now, steadier, standing where power once mocked him. He thought of his father's words, "Never beg for what's yours to build." He thought of Ruth's note, still pinned above his desk. "A man's worth ain't what they lend him. It's what he can stand to lose, and still stand." And he thought, finally, of Charles Denton, a man broken by his own walls, now part of the river that wound through every field he'd once dismissed. Isaiah whispered a prayer not of victory, but of peace. When he turned off the lights and stepped outside, the town was quiet. The stars stretched wide over Fairview, their reflection glinting in the slow, steady current of Mill Creek, a reminder that everything moves on, that even the coldest waters can carry something clean again. He paused, hat in hand, and smiled. Fairview, Trust Community Bank, open for business. The new sign gleamed gold in the starlight, letters catching the wind like a promise. Isaiah tipped his hat to the night, to the town, to the ghosts that had built his path, and walked home through the quiet streets. Behind him, the river murmured, neither angry nor mourning now, only moving forward.